want to open it up to questions for Amber or Ona or Henry about how these supports, how this work that they're doing in the kind of the advocacy nonprofit sector can support this idea. And I just want to start by saying part of what we're trying to do here, if you haven't been here all day, is we have to create a voice on issues like passing this constitutional amendment, on issues like that Ona's fought for around ending predatory lending and investing more in families and working families, and then a lot of the issues that McCune has funded around community development and investing in communities of color and underrepresented folks. But those are the kinds of issues as we start to develop an organization that has a hopefully, I hope it's not a dissident voice, but an additional voice, a different voice than the mainstream business community, which we all, I think, all have an uncomfortable relationship in terms of calling that group the business community, because we know it's a much more diverse community than a few organizations that claim to speak for all businesses. So I'm going to open it up here, and then we'll try to take a few questions, and then we'll wrap things up after that. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat or use your reaction button and raise your hand. So I'm going to look to the chat, and I may need some help from Perry and others to see if there's any questions that have already been asked. It looks like Juan Abeda had a question about, is there a role for enterprise capital investment by foundations? Maybe that's one for you, Henry.
I think the question is asking about what is commonly, more and more referred to as impact investing. So, as you all probably know, the way that a foundation like McCune gets its grant money is from an endowment. And so we have an endowment that sits in an investment portfolio and it generates interest. And then that interest is given out as grants. But more and more, there's a movement of kind of asking the question, if you have all of that money sitting in a portfolio with Shell Oil and Lockheed Martin and, all of these companies, how is it possible for us to actually get that money deployed in a different way? And so a lot of foundations are looking more and more at taking some of their endowment in their portfolios and actually using that to invest in private enterprises, in businesses. So the McCune Foundation has done a little bit of that. We started, I think our biggest investment was really more of a real estate deal, and that was our investment in downtown Albuquerque. So in the 90s, the McCune Foundation was a big partner in the revitalization of downtown Albuquerque. We were the developer of the theater block, of the Gold Street Lofts building, some other things like that. And so that was really our biggest foray into kind of deploying our capital in a different way. More recently, we invested a part of our portfolio, $1 million, into a fund run by RBC Capital. And that fund is focused specifically on New Mexico. And that money will be deployed by RBC Capital for things like SBA loans, and for housing projects and things like that. So yes, it does happen. The last thing I'll say is that there's a collaborative called the New Mexico Impact Investing Collaborative that is kind of based, fiscally sponsored out of the Santa Fe Community Foundation. And that is a bunch of local foundations that are trying to find more ways to do what you're asking about, Juan, which is to invest our endowment money into local businesses and local enterprises. It's going very slow. I think that foundations are super conservative, especially when it comes to their endowments, but there is movement in that direction.
So I see that Clifton has a hand up. Go ahead, Clifton, ask your question.
So it's a jumble of thoughts, and this is mainly for Amber, I guess. My ex-wife took care of children in the home when we were first married. My aunt took care of children in the home until she died. One of the things that crosses my mind is that, now we're calling it childcare, but back then they just called it babysitting. So it was a sort of a side thought, which I'm glad we're improving on. But it's a business with a real low cost of entry. And then it's also a business where there's a lot of cash. And so, this was a reasonable way for my aunt to make a fair amount of money. And she had community around her house all day. It was all very lovely. But it also seems like a terrific opportunity for cooperative development and so forth. And so just throwing all of that kind of stuff. Oh, and also the idea of what about businesses? I worked in the First National Bank building there on Central in San Mateo years ago. And I always thought, why don't we have a childcare on one of the floors of that building? So your response to that, please, Ms. Wallen.
Thanks, Clifton. I agree. I'd first just touch quickly on, you mentioned how we used to call it babysitting and now we call it childcare, and in some settings we call it early learning. And I'd say, that it reflects a growing awareness of just how important those positions are, that it's not just babysitting. You're actually, in those first 5 years, you're shaping a child's brain and setting up, you have a contribution to whether or not they'll graduate from high school or college and how much they'll earn later in life. And so, recognizing the more immense importance of that, and also for just healthy brain development, and also recognizing the increased professionalization of our workforce across the country and the state. More and more early care workers, we say teachers because they're required to go through such training. Some of it's education, many have degrees, as I mentioned, but there's an immense amount of training that's required. And so these really are professionals that are taking care of kids, which is a wonderful and necessary thing. And then we also, along with that professionalization, where we feel like there's a lot, the compensation hasn't caught up with what we expect out of that workforce just yet. And the funding for those programs and for those businesses just hasn't caught up just yet. But appreciate really also what you said about, childcare is just, it's essential to our communities and our families, and the connectivity aspect of it that it provides. And, your idea, I think that creative solutions like that, and thinking through how businesses can support their workers and how childcare is a crucial staple to that, whether it's setting up businesses or co-ops within certain industries or businesses, that those are just, those types of creative solutions are needed more and more, and need to be, scaled up to a degree, so that those types of ideas can be spread around the state, and knowing that all parts of the state have different access to those types of things, and how sometimes those key creative ideas and businesses really showing up are just an essential part of solving those childcare issues that I mentioned, because especially in rural areas of the state, there may not be that same public infrastructure. And so businesses do really just have that crucial role in supporting the issue from a number of different perspectives, I'd say.
All right. Anyone else on the panel have thoughts on that one, or any other questions that and I just wanted to, in terms, a lot of folks today have said, how do we do it? Like, what do we do? Do we give money? And, this is a great example, right, of how you can get involved directly. And I just want to tell a story about why it took 10 years for this funding, which is on the ballot in November, and you can help get it done so that families have the care and they, safe places for their kiddos to be and for their brains to develop, right? 10 years, because the biggest obstacle, in my opinion, I know I shouldn't rehash the past. My therapist keeps reminding me, but is that the business community, the big business community, they fought this idea for years. They fought this idea. And the reason was they thought it wasn't fiscally responsible, that we shouldn't be taking money out of the second or third largest permanent fund in the world, but 10 years and voices, along with a lot of folks, including Javier Martinez and others, like just stayed year after years, and we had to do a lot of work to get it done. But the reason why voices like all those on the call and other small business voices who think this is important need to be organized and get involved, because we have to have another perspective from business owners to say, yes, this is important. Yes, I'm a taxpayer, and yes, I want to make sure we invest, because this is important to me as a business owner, as just a member of this community. So that's a tangible example of why it matters that we get organized and that small businesses have a voice in the policy process. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Ona, do you have anything else to add?
Business cannot grow and a community cannot grow unless it's stable. So those investments, whether they're in homes or childcare or fair wages are all critical to that stabilization and the possibility then to build assets.
And I really like what Ona, you said about the amount of money that goes into incentives. We don't want to get into a big debate there. I think we all kind of feel strongly that if we put a fraction, as Ona mentioned, of the money that we put in incentivizing just one of these mega businesses, Amazon alone has gotten tens of millions of dollars in New Mexico just to locate here. But if we just put even a fraction of that into some of the work that Ona's doing, or to early childhood, I mean, imagine how different this community would be, or just to helping small businesses, right? And that's one of the things we should be working on. Others, Chris.
I think, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, I hit a button and I wasn't sure what it did. I had mentioned to Eric separately, but I just wanted to pass on to all of you. I'm sorry, I kind of came in and out of this meeting, so I didn't hear everything. But many of you probably do know, I'm not sure, but the health councils around the state just recently got CDC and Kellogg money. It goes along with all of the other federal money pouring into the state, especially around the COVID piece. And the money is at least until 2024. The health councils, as you may know, have been really underfunded or not funded for several years, but they literally are the quote unquote voice of the community in terms of making recommendations to the legislature about health needs in their communities and how they're doing it. This particular money has them working on vaccine equity and trying to get more vaccinations for people who are underserved right now in the state, which means a lot of it are communities of color and those who are out in the rural areas. The second year of this program will be focused on sort of quote unquote rebuilding communities. People originally said after COVID, now we say with COVID. But the idea is to help in rebuilding communities in a much more equitable way and reducing the barriers to a lot of the access to services and everything else that communities have. So in my mind, what they especially will be doing in the second year ties in pretty greatly to some of the things you've all been talking about. And the only reason I'm saying something now is that I would like to encourage any of you on this call who are obviously thinking forward and thinking differently, that one can't really rebuild a community in a healthy way without including the economic part of it and rebuilding that way. And I can tell you that most of the health councils really do not have much participation from people like yourselves, or certainly not from businesses, but also other groups. And right now they are being strongly encouraged to diversify and increase their memberships. So it may be an opportunity for many of you to be a little more involved with some of these health councils. It can not only build their strength, but also maybe some of your ideas building in with that. And I'll try to talk to Eric more about this at some point, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up for you all.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask how, is there a way that people can get involved? Is there a link or anything like that?
There's not really a link because it's kind of being worked through the Department of Health, but if any of you want to go to you can go to the New Mexico Alliance of Health Council's website. And there is information there on the health councils, like who their contact is, which county. There are, by the way, there are now 9 tribal health councils. So the Alliance is really doing some great work these days. But you can get the kind of contact information off of that site, and probably more information, because the New Mexico Alliance of Health Councils is really kind of the major push in a way behind all of this and supporting the health councils.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. I think if no one has anything else, it's been a long day. We started with 60 or 70 folks, and thank you for hanging in there. You guys are the the robust ones here. I know it's a Friday afternoon, so we just wanted to close this and thank him and turn it over to Perry. And just to say that want to thank Perry and her team who did a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure we got this together, and Sandra McCardle and Angela Merkert, and want to make sure, and Anna Vela, who did a lot of the work to make sure that this thing came off, and all of our supporters. But I wanted to give it over to Perry to sort of close this out.
Agree on the thanks. Thanks so much to Anna, and also my team member, Lisa Barrow, Jordan Tate for doing some graphics. Sandra, thank you. She just put in the nmhealthcouncils.org link from that helpful mention from Chris. And so yeah, my brain is buzzing. I'm sure all of you as well. I'll be really brief to wrap us up. Let's make sure, I just want to make sure before everybody logs off, check out our site, seednm.org. You can sign up for emails at the bottom of every single page, and do the survey if you haven't already done the survey. Let's see, I'm juggling a bunch of papers here. Okay, let me thank the sponsors so much. The Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity, American Sustainable Business Network, and thank you, David Levine, for speaking twice. Bernalillo County, Center for Civic Policy, City of Albuquerque Economic Development, Cooperative Catalyst in New Mexico, Current C Energy Systems, Inc., Las Cruces Green Chamber of Commerce, McCune Foundation, NM Netlinks, P-Brain Media, and RK Venture. Thank you so much. And to the speakers, I think it just was such a beautiful illustration of all the different aspects of community that we are talking about. And that's the vision that we would like to support. And it really just goes to show how circular it is and regenerative. Community, strong, healthy communities support small businesses, and small businesses can support strong, healthy communities. And I just feel like today was such an excellent step towards that. So please do stay in touch. What else did I want to say? Anything else from Seedlings? Thanks so much to Eric for really putting this all together, like the group, and Sandra and Angela for all the preliminary work that you did to just make this take off this year. Is there anything else from Seedlings before we really wrap?
I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined, and thank you to everybody who put it together. There will be next steps. We would have forced you to stay so we could discuss next steps at this point, but we couldn't figure out how to get beer or wine to everybody, so we could do it over beer or wine. And that's the only way we would have managed it. So will be next steps TBD. Thank you.
Yes, I think a beer wine patio is in our future for sure. And I love the way that Amber put it, like, of having to show up for the policy discussions. And I just thank everybody for doing that today. It was really very cool. If there's nothing else, I want to silence. Anybody's going to pipe in?
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Hats off.
Have a great weekend, everybody.